Black men are not lazy. They need opportunities. It's not that they don't want to be loyal to their women, but they want to be able to come home with their heads held up high. Brothers and sisters, being African is a blessing. And all those Africans who don't want the blessing can give it up and go on with themselves. I'm beyond the point in my life where I convince black people that they need to be proud to be African. If you're not, so be it. Go your own separate way. Principle number 1, African identity. And the priority of African identity. We belong to a lot of stuff. We belong to religions. We belong to organizations. We have our nationalities, our languages, our communities, our professional and fraternal organizations. But, as all the great Pan-Africanists taught us, from His Majesty to Marcus Garvey and beyond, you are an African first. And I think too often we allow ourselves to become Africans second. Christianity is a beautiful religion. Islam is a beautiful religion. All of the world religions are great, but none of them are more important than being African. And why? Because everything you belong to in the world, you chose it. You chose your religion, you chose your organization, you chose your nationality, and although you were born into it, you could have divorced yourself from it. You chose the language, and although you speak it, you could have decided to speak another language, but the only thing we belong to, fixed at birth, permanently and forever, is our African racial membership. God made you African, and you made yourself everything after that. Being African is not just an identity. It is not just an organization. It is spiritual, it is historical, it is cultural, and it is genetic. You cannot kill it. You cannot get rid of it. You cannot divorce yourself from it. You cannot bleach it out. You are African forever. And even when you die and your skin is returned to the soil from which it was created, your bones will still identify you as an African. Mr. Garvey said the Jew is always a Jew first. The Arab is always an Arab first. And so the African can do no less than to be an African first. Put the agenda and the best interests of all African people above and before our own personal agenda. And I would argue the reason African people suffer so much in this world today is because so few of us have a concept of putting the race before the ego. In fact, I always say you couldn't have a Negro without the ego, because if you take EGO out the word Negro, there's no Negro left. And unfortunately, as oppressed people, we suffer from hyper masculinity at times, to the point where my opinion is more important than yours and everyone else's. I'm the only one with the solution. The me-ism and the I-ism that comes from oppression, which forces us to want to dominate discussion, because the white man never allow our opinions to matter much in his discussions. When you look at black on black crime, whether it's in St. Croix, back home in Philadelphia, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in Europe, you cannot separate black on black crime from the demasculinization of the African man. The African man is the only man who's not allowed to be a man in the fullest sense of the word, because his masculinity is considered a threat to every other man. And so the destruction and the oppression of the black man has always been a global priority for everyone else. And what happens to all that masculine energy that gets oppressed by the European world order? It becomes pathological, and it comes out into our communities. in very dysfunctional ways. Everything from domestic violence to organizational tribalism to meism and I-ism and everything else. So if we want to help the African man heal our egos, we're going to have to create opportunities for the black man. We can't talk about black on black crime without talking about the lack of opportunities that we are making for one another. We can't talk about black men getting married and staying loyal to our beautiful African queens if we don't give our black men opportunities to become the breadwinners in their households. Black men are not lazy. They need opportunities. It's not that they don't want to be loyal to their women, but they want to be able to come home with their heads held up high. Brothers and sisters, being African is a blessing. And all those Africans who don't want the blessing can give it up and go on with themselves. I'm beyond the point in my life where I convince black people that they need to be proud to be African. If you're not, so be it. Go your own separate way. You can't be a white man, they don't want you. You can't be Chinese, they don't want you either. The Jews, the Arabs, the Mexicans, nobody wants you. The only home you have is Africa. And back home in America, we got all these new fancy philosophies popping up in the conscious community about how we didn't come from Africa, we was already here. Well, if that's the case, prove it genetically. Yes, we were already here, but where did you come from? Isn't it amazing? Everyone knows they came from Africa except black people in the West. That's a self-hate thing. But we need to also be clear that if we want our people to be proud to be African, we got to give them reasons for it. And those reasons cannot simply be located in the ancient history of our ancestors. Because you can teach an African child how great we used to be. You can teach an African child about the civilizations we used to have. You can teach an African child about all of the great inventions that we manifested a long time ago. But if you don't show them greatness now, if you don't show them opportunities now, if you don't give them a reason to be African now, you will not rescue them from the trappings of European indoctrination. See, we have to understand that we have a God-given obligation to build for the future, not just reclaim the past. The saying comfort bird looks back but is walking forward. Some of us think that we can walk back into the great kingdoms of Africa. You can't. You can't. You have to build the kingdom going forward.